right, Jade. The year in review.
The year in review. So we're doing it a little bit different for our last episode of the year, where we are going to go right back to January.
And we're going to go through each of the months and just kind of go through what our key takeaways were from the show and anything else interesting that happened during the year. And I feel like this is a double celebration because it's not only our last episode of 2022, but it's also episode 50. So it just feels like a bit of a milestone.
Exactly. It sure does. So I'll start with the month of January. So what we've done is we've gone through all of the episodes that were released each month. We picked out our favourite and what our key takeaways were from that episode, and also some key things that happened during that month that, you know, may feel like a long time ago or not that long ago. So during January, we released an episode called The Great Subcontractor Debate, and this started our kind of mini-series on this. And during this episode, we spoke about the importance of deciding whether the person that you are hiring as a contractor or an employee, as to whether they are a contractor or employee. So making sure that you get that correct, because so many times we've seen people hire subcontractors that should have actually been an employee. So making sure that you get it right from the get-go so you don't get caught out with unpaid super and a whole range of other things that come with that as well.
Yeah, so the ATO has these rules around how your subcontractor is deemed for those particular things, workers' comp, superannuation, etc. And if you are someone who does hire subcontractors, go back and listen to that episode because you might be surprised.
Yeah, exactly right. So definitely something really important. On a high though, something that happened in January that really stood out to me was Ash Barty winning the Australian Open, which was absolutely awesome. It was so good. And she, of course, then announced her retirement. But I still remember that in January, and it was so good. And I think all of Australia was celebrating for her.
Absolutely. Okay, our next month, Feb. So in February, we released an episode called Organisation is a Juggling Act. And I think, especially with everything going on at the moment, like there is not one single business owner that we talk to who isn't just going, life is crazy at the moment. What was this year? What is going on? And so I think those organisation tips from that episode were absolutely fabulous, especially when you've got a lot going on in your life. But there's one tip that really stuck out to me, and Jade, this was one that you brought forward, which was called eating the frog.
Yeah.
And the basis of this tip is basically to eat the frog before the frog eats you. So if you have something that you need to do, but it's that dreaded task that you don't want to do or you keep putting it off, make it a priority and get it done. Get it done straight away so that it's off your plate, and basically eat the frog before the frog eats you. And this is something that it's stuck with me, and it's something that I've really tried to push in my everyday life is just, you know, it's like when you're trying to get your child to eat their vegetables, you want them to eat them first so that then they can enjoy the rest of their meal. And it's a really good philosophy to have. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I use it all the time. I mean, this morning, for example, as we were getting ready to record, I said to you straight after the podcast, I have to do this task that I have to do because it's a task that I'm not really looking forward to, but I just want to get it done and off my plate.
Absolutely.
So I use it every day at work, but also in my home life where I go, oh, I've got to do the vacuuming. I'm just going to do it and get it done.
Yeah. And then it kind of gets that off your list, so you're not spending your day being dragged down knowing that you've got this looming dark cloud.
I know. I know.
So something that, was a big takeaway from me in that episode and actually has changed a lot of the way that I do things. So thank you for that, Jade.
No worries, Lauren. Happy to pass it on.
But unfortunately, February also was the start of the floods in Eastern Australia. So we had a lot of flooding in Queensland and in northern New South Wales, which then came down during that particular period and ended up all the way down in Victoria with a lot of damage, a lot of people losing homes and valuables, and it was actually quite a traumatic event. But I think it's something that we can look back on and go, hey, look what we've gotten through.
Yeah, but see, the thing is I feel like it's just kind of continued since February. I mean, we've still got all of these terrible floods happening, so it just hasn't really stopped, unfortunately. And crazy stuff, but I've seen on the news that a few people that work at the Bureau and things like that are actually predicting that we will be in drought next year.
Yeah, so it will be, it's going to be interesting to see if that happens. I mean, we've had droughts, we've had bushfires, and then we've had flooding.
And a pandemic as well.
And a pandemic in there as well. So it's just kind of been a little bit all over the place. But I think it's really built up our resilience as Australians in what we've taken.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We do go through a lot as Australians.
So February was another month of resilience, we'll call it.
All right, and in March, my favourite episode that we released in March was one that you and Joe recorded, Lauren, and it was the International Women's Day episode.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, I am so grateful to be surrounded by women in my workplace and also have a leader that gives such great opportunities and supports us, and it's something that I never take for granted. And I think 2022 has been a really, really big year for women. Although earlier we were talking about how the pay gap hasn't increased, the pay gap hasn't, improved, but it has been a really, really big year for women. We've seen, a lot happen, and I think it's really, really good stuff. In March, we also seen the start of Russia invading Ukraine, which has, again, something that's just continued on and on. Yeah. And in all honesty, it doesn't feel like it's been that long that it's been happening. So.
No, and it's really affected quite a lot of businesses. It was kind of the start of this inflation issue that has driven our economy, the inability to be able to get certain supplies and things like that. I know the building and construction industry particularly felt those supply and demand issues that were happening and are still happening in the economy. So, it's interesting that we have been dealing with this for, such a long time. All the way back in March was when this first kicked off. Exactly
right. In March, on the 4th of March, actually, I remember the day, Shane Warne also passed away, which was something that all of Australia has felt, I'm sure.
Yes.
And it was a bit of a shock for everybody as well. So big month in March.
Yeah, it was. It was, losing an icon is never an easy thing. But again, I'm just going to keep plugging away with how resilient we are.
That's right.
Okay, so next month, April, we did an episode called The Art of Getting Paid. And this is an episode that I really enjoyed doing, and I think it's so super important that for business owners to have that process in place of how they, chase up their accounts receivable. If people owe you money, what is your process for getting that money back in your bank account? It's something that a lot of people have issues with, and it's something that a lot of people don't feel comfortable with. But there is an art to it. And I think the biggest takeaway from there is having a process and being consistent with it.
Exactly.
And I know that we have found a massive, massive improvement in that particular area from staying consistent.
Exactly right. So it's such an important thing that any business owner needs to stay on top of.
Absolutely. So if you are someone who does struggle with getting money back through the door, you're having accounts receivable issues which are starting to impact your cash flow, check out that episode and see if there's a few things that you can implement straight away to try and help you redeem some of that cash.
Definitely. All right, so May we released an episode which was called Where Do I Start Business Startups? And this was also another mini series that we went through, and we kind of went through the basics of what you need to be aware of if you are starting a business and some of the important things that you need to keep in mind. And I think it was a really fabulous episode because in 2022 we've seen such an increase of people going out on their own or starting their own business or even a little bit of a side hustle that probably grew very quickly. And it's these foundational things that you need to get right from the get-go because it's so hard to go back and catch up. So that's a really interesting episode. We also had a lot going on in May. So we had the federal election and we also had the new Prime Minister and the new government. So Labor won the election. And May was also the month that the interest rate rises started. So in May, we had our first interest rate increase of 0.25%, and that has carried on throughout the year, of course, as everybody knows, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Next, in June, there was an episode that we released called Asset Protection, Avoid Losing Your House. And I think that a lot of business owners don't realise that the way that their business is structured can have an impact on personal assets. So that asset protection is so super important that you get right from the inception of your business, or, you know, when it starts to grow and starts to become a little bit riskier. It's really important that you go and talk to someone about your asset protection and how those things can be structured. To make sure that you're not, you know, at risk of losing personal assets that you've worked really hard to maintain. So it is something that I think is super, super important and something that maybe can be part of everyone's New Year's resolution to have a look at for their business is there a particular way that my business needs to be structured so that my assets aren't at risk?
Exactly.
So something that is, you know, very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. In July, we also released another very important episode, which was called Keeping Safe from Cyber Attacks. Now, I feel like this is now a super relevant episode. Back in July, we hadn't really had the huge cyber attacks that we've had, you know, with Optus and Medibank and things like that. So, but there was an increase in scams going around. So that is a really good episode. If you want to go back and have a listen to that, we go through some of the common, tricks that scammers use and how you can keep yourself safe, which I seen on the news this morning actually that scammers are really ramping up their efforts over the Christmas period. So everyone just be hyper aware. July, we also seen the start of the new financial year.
Woohoo!
Which is always exciting for us nerdy accountants.
Absolutely. August, we also released a super, super relevant episode called The Impact of Interest and Inflation. And it's something that I guess even 4 months ago was starting to become a bit of an issue, and it's just powered on since then. So I think that, you know, it's something that we're trying to see an end to, but it's something that we have to live with for the next few months until it sort of tips over the edge and we start heading back down. And so that episode, I think, was really good on how to deal with those particular rises and what you can sort of do to help stay afloat.
Yeah, exactly right. September, we released our episode called Spring into Sustainability, which was perfectly timed for the start of spring in September. And look, we've seen such a huge increase in businesses and just individual consumers trying to be sustainable. And I think, well, we know next year it's going to be even bigger and bigger, and it's just going to continue growing. And it is a fantastic episode for people to listen to and see how that sustainability doesn't just impact the big guys, but also small businesses and what we can do as small business owners or even just individual consumers to make an impact. September was also the month that the Queen passed away, which in all honesty, it feels like it was a lot longer ago than September. And we also got King Charles sworn in. September was also the month that Optus was hacked, which kind of rocked quite a few people, and it was all over the news for, quite a little while. It was a bit shocking. So that was kind of the month where these huge hacks and data breaches started.
Yeah, and I remember like those ransom notes coming out and things like that. It kind of felt like something off a movie, really surreal and quite bizarre. Bizarre month September was.
It was.
So October we released an episode called 2 Apps to Help Your Business, and this was off the back of XeroCon, which, as we know, is our nerdy accounting convention that Jade, we had a blast, didn't we?
We soaked it up. I remember, after the 2 days, I got home and I was just absolutely buggered.
I know, and you've got all of these ideas flowing through your head and things like that, but it was an absolutely amazing time, and I think we're both so grateful to have gone. But we found 2 really great apps out of XeroCon that, we would just think are fabulous for business owners. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about Kogo. I already spoke about that at the start of the episode, but that's where I found Kogo and my life changed. But having that particular app available has just been amazing. And the second app was Wheel, which was previously called DiviPay, and it's basically a way of giving out cards, like as in debit cards, to your staff members, but they're all electronic and they just connect up to your Apple Pay or whatever, your Google Pay, and allows you to set parameters and limits on your staff members. But if they need to be using business funds, or you're finding that you're having a lot of staff reimbursements, then that's a really good way of getting some small amount of cash to your staff members without them having a physical card or no limit or things like that.
Yeah, and there's some really cool features that Wheel does offer. So definitely go back and listen to that episode because we do go into a bit more detail. But yeah, they are 2 amazing apps.
Yeah, and just how much fun we had at XeroCon as well.
Yeah, it was a good time. November, this was a tricky month for me to pick my favourite episode, but I did pick the episode called Working From Home Tax Deductions Slashed. And probably, people may think it sounds a little bit boring, but I promise it's not. But I think this episode is super relevant because we know that the tax office is trying to claw back its huge debt that it currently has, and it did kind of put things on hold during COVID. And then in November, the ATO released that they are making changes to the way people can claim their working from home deductions, which, does result in a decrease in what they can claim. And I just found this really interesting because, in all honesty, I didn't think it was too surprising because since the pandemic, we've seen such an increase in people working from home. So therefore the tax deductions for that have increased. And I think this might be a little bit of a trend that the ATO are on. I mean, who knows if, I am looking into a crystal ball here. But I think we may see a few more changes coming out in relation to this as well. November was also the month that Medibank was hacked. So another hacking and data breach as well happening in November.
Yes, scary times. And hopefully that's the last of those big sort of corporations being hacked with sensitive data. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that.
Definitely.
December, this month that we are currently in. Look, last week's episode was one that I think was so super important about the 2023 business trends. And something that I want to mention here is that while it's going to be tough in 2023 and all of those business trends we went through, there wasn't a lot of positives in there. I think it's just being able to gear up to know what we're in for. We've been through 2022. We're almost at the end of it. It's been a tough year, but it means that we've done it. We can do it. We can keep doing it. And I think that the biggest thing here is just going, what should we expect?
Yeah, exactly right. So looking back on everything that has happened since January, as you said, Lauren, Australians are resilient people with everything that we've been through. And I think especially all of the natural disasters that we've had, not only this year, but also the last few years with the bushfires and the floods and the pandemic and everything that's gone on, it has built resilience. So I have no doubt that we will get through 2023, of course.
Absolutely. And I think there's some really big positives that will come out of some of these trends as well. I know that the sustainability relevancy is something that I think is super positive. I think that, with everything going on with interest rates and inflation, it's going to come down at some point next year. Everything's going to level out, and it will be good to get back to that sort of normal rate of how everything's going. And so I think that episode is something that, I guess every business owner should just be aware of and kind of gearing up for, so that we can tackle 2023 head on and make sure there's no surprises, because I think there was a few in 2022.
Yeah, just a few. So, yes, lots to look forward to in the new year. And just quickly, sorry if you can hear a pigeon hooting throughout this whole episode. We've got one sitting on the balcony right next to us. So, yes, sorry if you can hear that. But yes, a lot to look forward to in 2023. I think it'll be the best year yet.